What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Narwhal News. Narwhal News is your weekly FRC podcast and video series that focuses on competition predictions, strategy analysis, robot features, and more. We're so excited to have you back for our 6th episode. We are FRC Team 3128, the Aluminum Narwhals, a FRC team from San Diego, California, and Canyon Crest Academy. My name is Bryn, and we have some splashing good content for you this week, so let's dive right in. I'm here today with James to go over a week 1 recap. Did any competitions or robots stand out to you in particular this week?
Yeah, I think that the meta of the game was really interesting this week, and I kind of wanted to just talk a little bit about like what robots were successful. So obviously, the teams that were ranking the highest were the ones that were getting the Coral RP, because that was, I think, the one that was the major differentiator between the top performing ones and like the ones that were just performing good. And that was really important based off of how you did in teleops. So the main things that really successful robots were doing was either having a good auto-align system with the reef so that they weren't missing any L4 when they got to the reef, or having a ground intake pickup, which was really important. Speaking from experience at CanPack, which we went to obviously just a week ago, some teams that I can think about are 4270 and 359. They obviously beat us in finals as Alliance 1. They were very, very successful because they were both able to have that ground intake that made them really good at scoring efficiently and quickly, because they didn't have to go all the way to the Coral Station. And us, we had some trouble even at the human player station, and that was something that also slowed down our time. They didn't really have to do that as much as we did.
Yeah. Ground intake definitely made like defense pretty much absolute, because those human players could absolutely just chuck all those Coral down.
Exactly, and that's really interesting to think about as well. How could you defend a team that only has ground intakes? We struggled through that, and we tried some interesting techniques as well. But we'll have to see how that pans out down the line.
Now, what about actual alliances themselves? I know in Crescendo, we had some upsets, particularly at regionals like Winnie Port, but have you seen any trends so far?
Yeah, I think that overall in this game, we haven't really seen any upsets at all. A1 and A2, Alliance 1 and Alliance 2, have basically won every single competition that happened that week 1. There were a few upset matches at specific events, maybe. I'm thinking about maybe like 47-38 and 80-33 at Orange County. They left early in the lower bracket, maybe like match 12 or something. They kind of went out earlier than expected, and I think it was mostly due to defense, or maybe just some missed cyclage. But overall, only Alliance 1 and Alliance 2 have won, which it's probably just to the fact that, like Oliver mentioned, we're really only seeing 2 offense spots overall in Crescendo, because it just so happens that the reef is so small and the path is so small that having a third robot there can oftentimes hurt to more than help the Alliance score, because you have more congestion there, basically. So yeah, exactly.
Now, did you have any regionals that particularly stood out to you this week?
Yeah, I think I wanted to talk really quickly about Pinnacle's regional. That was definitely one of the most competitive ones, obviously not to discount any other regionals, because I think overall robots were very, very, very strong this year. Especially because the fact that we're almost filling out the reef is really insane.
Crazy in week 1,
yeah. But yeah, in Pinnacles, I wanted to highlight, there's like four top world-class teams that were there doing so good. Obviously, Citrus Circuits, Quicksilver, Rembrandt, and Blazing Bulldogs. All of them had a mixture of the things that I mentioned with like the ground intake and the auto-align. But they also just had really, really fast robots that could score efficiently and didn't make any mistakes. They both ended up making finals. It was 60-78 and 604 against 44-81 and 581. And it was I would say it was a pretty close match in finals 1. They obviously both did double defense, and I just wanted to shout out, I think both sides of the alliance were doing really cool cycles, where they were doing scoring in the coral in the reef, but then immediately picking up an algae and then scoring it into the barge right away. And I think that's really efficient, and that's kind of what I was imagining in my head with a robot that could barge and also reef score at the beginning of Reefscape. And it was really cool to see that kind of come into fruition. But yeah, ultimately, unfortunately, 4481 in Finals 2 Disaster ended up striking because they basically got stuck on algae. And then 581 tried to push them off, and it ended up with them landing on their side. So they basically weren't able to do anything for the rest of the match. And yeah, that was kind of the end of that. But it was a really, really well fought battle between those 4 teams. And I think that all of them are going to be very successful throughout the rest of the competition season. Yeah. I also wanted to talk a little bit about some other stuff that's just kind of just miscellaneous. ISR 1 and 2, I think those were like the first 2 events that you really saw in the competition season, especially before any regionals happened, because they were like Monday through Wednesday-ish. It was just really, really cool to see Team Sycamore, a team that we haven't seen to be as offensively strong in Israel, really, really shine this year. I think they did so good. They were so efficient and consistent. They had a really good auto, and yeah, I don't know, they just crushed both those events. And obviously they're going to go to Worlds because they've already been qualified, but even without that pre-qualification, there's no doubt that they would have made it. Yeah, and then another thing, I think that some of the scorches that happened this week were also interesting. Specifically, I just wanted to talk about Lake Superior scorch. Lake Superior, the top alliance was, I think, 876 or something. I'm not 100% sure. Yes, so 876 Thunder Robotics ranked first, which ended up splitting some really good teams like the Megahertz, and also Upper Creek 1619 and Hilltopper Robotics 1732. And that was really, really impactful. It ended up with 1619 being a 4th alliance captain, instead of being picked by like Megahertz or something. And obviously they made it all the way to the finals, so they were really successful at that, but they still ended up losing to Megahertz with Tonka bots. And yeah, that was just a really interesting way that that shook up that entire regional. And I think that overall there wasn't much else in terms of scorches throughout other regionals, but there were a few tiny like decline chains, but overall it wasn't too big. I mean, we had one decline. It wasn't super impactful. It was like Alliance 7. They like Funky Monkeys declined or something, and then they just became the Alliance.
At Campac?
Yes, at Campac. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I think that week 1 we saw way more than we anticipated, and it was just really, really cool to see the game actually being played and how successful a lot of teams were at it. Yeah. That's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us, James, with your week 1 competition recap.
Thank you so much.
We're back with Oliver to look at some week 1 match strategy takeaways. Hey, Oliver.
Hello.
Can you tell us about some trends that you've seen in week 1 competitions?
Of course. Week 1 was really interesting, actually. We saw a lot of the 2 offense, 1 defense alliances of upper alliances that are traditionally expected at regionals such as OCR, Campac, Israel. And again, that's expected. However, the defense we saw was actually very interesting because, while very powerful against one source, it was actually very beatable. And particularly ground intake robots we saw were able to perform really well against defense, as in combination with a human player sort of launching coral out of the stations. It would sort of bounce out to the reef, which made it really hard to defend those robots without getting penalties. Additionally, it seemed like robots were fairly easily able to sort of transfer around the source defense and just go to the other station. And that was a really interesting thing because we saw at PHR, in fact, a lot of the upper alliances were actually playing triple offense. Like Alliance 1, I think, initially had their defense bot on defense, of course, but they later pulled it out to play triple offense, and we saw some really high scores there of the 200s.
Yeah. Can you tell me more about the role that Algae and L1 played in the week 1 competitions?
Oh, for sure. Algae was really interesting, actually, because I think the biggest thing we saw with Algae that we weren't expecting was the result of it on the ground and cluttering the field. because a lot of the alliances we saw that were able to score a lot of the algae in the net avoided a lot of that clutter, which sped up their cycles a lot. Like most of the alliances, actually I think all of the alliances putting up points in the 200s had algae bots clearing out the algae, scoring it into the net, and allowing them to cycle really, really quickly. However, I do think that it'll be interesting to see as we move forward if it'll be worth actually scoring all the algae or just scoring the algae close to you and sort of just dumping the algae that you don't score onto the opponent's side. I know we watched defense bots in a few competitions actually sort of just grab algae from their reef and go throw it into their opponent's area to cause disruption. And yeah, you don't really need to score the far algae. It's pretty easy to just pick up and drop off and not get into your area. So I think as we move forward, algae scoring will be worth it to clear the algae out of your area, but not worth it for the points due to the long amount of time it takes to score. As for L1, we actually saw a very big lack of any L1 bot. There was basically no bot that could do L1 well. And I think that's actually a big hole for a lot of teams that they can fill, just being able to score a ton of L1 cycles. And as we move forward again, we saw a lot of the reefs being almost filled actually, everything but L1. So I think a lot of the upper level competition will boil down to like how much of that L1 can you fill while still filling the reef.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And even with the algae, besides clearing up your space, it reduces the risk of you getting possibly beached on algae,
which
we
saw so much.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that, and that could definitely impact the outcome of many high stakes matches. So tell me about Autonomous. Was Autonomous particularly interesting throughout week 1?
Yeah, Autonomous actually seems very, very powerful in this game. The fact that the Autonomous scored pieces are worth a lot of points. I mean, not quite as much as maybe last year, but still seems very important, with L4 corals being worth 7 points when being scored in Autonomous. And we've seen many teams able to get successful 3-piece L4 autos, and a few teams even getting L4 autos like Orbit. And I think that auto will be very important this year. We saw Israel Regional, Alliance 1 was able to come out of Autonomous with 51 points, which is basically a quarter of their score.
Yeah, that was really, really interesting. Now, I also want to talk a little bit more about how match strategy possibly affects competition rankings. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Oh yeah, so match strategy is going to be really important this year, I think, for quals matches, because with 2 RP that can basically be solo completed in the auto and climb RP, as long as your alliance has any robot that parks and your other 2 robots can leave the starting line, you will basically get those 2 RPs every match. In addition to the win RP, if you win a match, that's going to be 5 RP, which is pretty close to the max. And with the Coral RP looking very difficult to achieve, a lot of this year I think is just going to boil down to, can you win your matches? And I know for our regional at Canadian Pacific, our main strategy was just winning all the matches we could and just getting that 5 RP since we had a deep climb and we could score a piece in during auto. So yeah, I would recommend for this year, I would just try to win matches and snag those 2 RP on the way.
Okay, thank you so much for those competition insights, Oliver. They were really great. Catch us next time with Abraham with a ranking of his top 10 week 1 robots. And now I'm back with Abraham to give us his top 10 ranking of robots who competed in week 1. Hey, Abraham.
Hi. So starting off our top 10, I have number 10 is 2847, the megahertz from the Lake Superior Regional, captain of 2. Their sideways elevator simplicity with only 1.5 DOFs, plus their algae throwing ability made the robot really nice for that week 1 event. Getting it all done, especially with the Scorch, made it really effective. Number 9, I have the Robonauts, building that nice ground intake, one of the more simpler robots this year. It's basically, I would say, like a Rembrandts with a ground intake. Very nice robot. Getting that win at Tomball with, I believe, who did they win with?
Ooh.
I think they won with...
No, I typed the wrong one to TVA. They won with 6800.
So 6800 Valor.
Yes.
Valor, very good team. Number 8, going into the Ontario district is 4946, the Alpha Dogs. Really honed in on that funnel plus folding manipulator, really nice. Got the job done. Love the simplicity. That's why they won their first event. And number 7, I have 604 Quicksilver at Pinnacles Regional. Taking the win with Citrus at the event. Really nice 3-piece with about a 2.5 DOF that's really clean. They had some intaking issues, I want to say, but they definitely had a very effective L4, and I'm excited to see if they can improve on their deep climb and maybe make their funnel a little better, because it did seem to have some jamming issues. Number 6, I have their partners in crime, Citrus. Winners of the Captain of 1 at Pinnacles. Really nice ground intake of both algae for the net and ground intake of coral. One thing I do want to see more is maybe less shakiness in the robot, because it does seem to cause some lineup issues, along with maybe an extra event under his belt, the driver maybe continuing to get better, because he did seems to have some issues with missing. Other than that, great robot from Citrus this year. Amazing ground to net algae, and really loving to see what they do in their next regional.
Truly sublime.
Yep. Number 5, I have Team Sycamore 5614 from ISR 1 and 2. Getting that back-to-back win plus impact in EI. Really effective, simple robot, intaking and outtaking at the same side, plus a really effective, donut climb, keeping it simple. And that's why they have a 70 plus EPA and Statbotics, keeping it simple, getting that 3-piece auto done really well. And then number 4, I have Team 3467 One Dumb Windup, getting the win at, I believe, I think it was in Southern Maine, getting it with Buck's Wrath. Keeping it OA. You have Granite State. Oh, okay. Really?
It is Granite State.
Oh, they won with 63-20. I'm tripping. Captain of 1 picking 63-28, dropping to the lower bracket, but keeping the robot very effective. Only 2.5 DOFs. A big funnel for intaking into that pivoting manip on an elevator, keeping it very simple. That's why they have such an EPA as well. Having that consistent deep climb as well made it really effective. And then keeping it within New England, though, I have 63-29 Buck's Wrath. Getting that win with Gompe the Herd 190, captaining that one alliance. Really effective robot, very similar to 3467. I love the simplicity of just 2.5 DOF with a pivoting intake on an elevator with a giant funnel. Very effective robot. Would love to see what they do at their next district event, especially with their simple climb that got it done. Number 2, I want to say Chill Out with their effective ground intake that centers coral in that giant wide funnel with the rollers on the inside into an arm that's very similar to what Orbit has, or Crusaders. One of the most effective teleop scorers in the game, if not the most effective. But I do want to see what they improve on climb, because it seems their climb isn't working too well. They could figure out some things, and that's why I have them so high, because they have the potential of improving. Number 1, I think, is no surprise at all. It's 1690 Orbit. Coming in very strong, first event of the year, and taking that top EPA spot, taking that top EPA spot on Statbotics. Impressive 4-piece auto, teleop that rivals that of Chill Out. Having that suction cup that can do de-algae, algae, all core levels, ground intake that's just so effective at getting pieces, so hard to defend as defense becomes more relevant in this game. And they also can improve on the climb. It seems their climb has been working on the later matches, but getting that consistency is what I'm excited to see at ISR 3. How high can their EPA go? If they get that climb locked in and they figure out some of the issues with auto and maybe get a little more human player training, I really think that Orbit has the best potential out of anyone in this game, and they've already proved it. Even without potential, their floor is just so high after ISR 1. And that's my top 10.
Okay, thank you so much for those insights, Abraham. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Narwhal News. We hope you'll continue to stay with us for the rest of the Rescape season. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, put them down below in the comment box on our Spotify or our YouTube. We'll see you next week and keep on swimming.